Okay. We live? We going? I think we're going.
Hello.
Hey, Fraser, how we doing?
Good, Chris.
Cool.
How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Oh, they've changed. They've changed things in Discord. It's throwing me off. There's a
Oh
little.
no.
There's a little uh, things up there of you and me on my screen on top of overlaying other stuff. It's very disconcerting.
Ah.
Yeah.
I can't see it on the stream feed,
No,
so.
no, no, no. It's on OBS. It's overlaid on. It's
Oh
overlaying on
god.
OBS, and I'm like, what's going on? Why,
Right.
why are you doing these things to me?
That's fair.
We'll have to
Discord
move
loves to
to
just.
we'll have to move to Teams, mate.
Oh
Teams
my
is so
god.
Teams is just
If
such
you
a
ever wanted to tell me to leave, that's how you do it. You'd send me a Teams invite. Like cold
We're going
walking,
corporate. We're
Chris.
going MS Teams all the way. You saying you don't
Oh.
like Teams? Goodness me.
Oh
What's
my
wrong with
gosh. I thought
Teams?
I was done with it when I finished uni.
No, it's Microsoft. It's going to get into
It
everything.
crawls its way back
Oh
into
yeah, yeah,
into
absolutely.
my life.
I think it's Teams is yeah. I saw an article the other day saying all the amazing new features on Teams, and I thought, oh my god, I should take that into all my classes and show it in the classes. So there you go. Teams is amazing. Get all the students to read through it and celebrate all the wonderful new stuff on Teams. Apparently they brought a new version recently, so. But
Oh my gosh.
yeah, yeah. So I was going to ask, being the Elden Ring fan you are, have you played Elden Ring Night Rain?
I haven't. I've actually
Mm.
barely even seen anything about it. Have you touched it at all?
No, but I have watched some streams of it. Yeah, it sounds like Fraser's getting into the sort of like job stuff, where you just don't have time to play games so much anymore. Is this the case, or is it something different?
Look, I get as much gaming in as I can,
Mm-hmm.
but I actually kind of bounce off of Elden Ring a little bit. Um,
Bounce off. What do you mean?
it didn't scratch the same itch that other FromSoft games have scratched for me. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
I'm not sure why. I genuinely think it's probably the open world nature of it. It might have been the multiplayer, but so
Mm-hmm.
much so. I mean, uh, after playing it, um, when I tried to get Gemma into FromSoft, we started with Dark Souls 3 and we played
Mm-hmm.
that co-op.
Mm-hmm.
When trying to play that co-op has been a nightmare because it's of their obtuse sort of game design instincts,
Mm-hmm.
especially compared to something like Elden Ring, where they really streamlined the multiplayer. But yeah, so same with what was the new one that they announced? Oh, I can't remember what it was called.
Not Night Rain.
No, they announced a new game that's coming up that was also multiplayer, and I don't know. I mean, it's exciting. I'm sure it will be fun, but I feel like it sort of drifted away from where I was playing from soft games, and that's fine. That's all right. I can go back and play Dark Souls 3, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I 100%ed Armored Core, so I could probably go back and play those games. There's plenty to play.
I'd be very interested to see what you think if you get a chance to have a look at even just some streams and stuff of Night Rain, to see what you think of the gameplay. I have a feeling you might, because I'm looking at it, I'm going, it looks interesting, but it does not look like the game that I kind of enjoy with Elden Ring. It's much faster paced, I guess, is one of the main things. So there's not
Interesting.
much chance to sort of just cruise and wander around and build up your character and stuff. It looks a bit more hardcore in certain ways. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I'll maybe I'll have a look into it and can report back next week,
yeah.
next stream.
Okay. Yeah. Do so. Cool. So
On that note,
yeah.
I did want to say I ran into an issue this past week. Gemma and I did using GitHub
Mm-hmm.
and experimenting with Unreal Engine's terrain tools. Very
Okay.
quickly ended up with a map file that was bigger than 100 megs. So Git said no. So we set up git LFS, which is meant to be able to handle that. Not knowing what we're doing is the main issue. We ran into running out of all of that storage very, very quickly because you only get a gig for free. And so we theorized that it's because we were tracking all of the map files, and we should have just tracked the specific map file that was getting too big. But we found out in the course of trying to undo all of this that you can't remove those files from the storage, the remote storage.
Yeah, no. No. That's how Git
We're
works.
looking at
It maintains your history. It maintains your history.
Yeah, we're looking at $5 a month or deleting the repo and rebuilding it, and only tracking the specific one we need. And I understand that, you know, that's the benefit of having something like Git, is having all that history tracking, but I just figured it would be easier to sort of, there would be some easier way to do it. And from what I researched, yeah, it's either delete the repo and rebuild it, or be a paying member to access their support line and ask the support to remove it. So
okay, so can I ask you a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you were using a git ignore file for Unreal Engine. Was it a recent one? I mean, because I know that they have made some changes to Unreal Engine over the last few iterations. So I'm just wondering whether there's something in there which is recent to do with the terrain, which you should also be keeping out of the repo. That would be my assumption. Yeah, they might have added, I don't know, they might have added some kind of built file. So what the git ignore file does is to remove sort of all the stuff that you don't need, and that's often stuff that's already like being compiled for playing. So I would look into that. Maybe, you know, go on to. Are you part of the Unreal Engine Discord group?
No,
or the Reddit?
I'm not.
Reddit. I think there's an Unreal Engine subreddit. You can try that one. But Unreal Engine Discord group is probably it's very active. So, and ask them. That would be my suggestion. And then the second thing, so blow your repo away and start a new one. That is unfortunately so often the solution when it comes to things Git oriented. Yeah, unfortunately Git is not ideal for gaming, as I'm sure I've said to you before. But the other solutions cost a lot of money, so that's unfortunate. So Git is kind of what a lot of people use, but it's not ideal, and it breaks. And when it breaks, it causes lots of headaches. And you have to be very methodical about the way you use it. You have to be careful about what you upload. And certainly, there are file limits. So what's the repo size limit on GitHub now? I think it was 2
gigabytes.
So there's the other solution. Go to hang on, what's the other one? Git. Oh goodness me, how can I forget? Oh, there's another Git one that I use, which is 5 gig. So that's another. Particularly if you're doing Unreal stuff, 5 gig is a bit more realistic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels like one of those things that doesn't get talked about a lot.
It depends on what forums you're on.
Well,
it does get talked about a lot if you're on the right forums, because it breaks a lot. Yeah, it causes problems.
From my perspective, it just feels like it's that, like, it's so obscure. Trying to understand it, I feel like I need to dedicate a huge chunk of my time to just get my head around it. I feel like we're really.
You're talking about Git.
Yeah.
Git itself. Yeah, it is. It's deliberately like that. It was developed by Linus Torvalds. Don't know whether I'm getting that pronunciation correct. The same guy who created Linux, and all that stuff is deliberately obtuse and can only be understood by hardcore low-level programmers. I'm not saying that in jest. Like, that is, it's deliberately that way. Those people like to, they like the sort of arcane idea of coding and stuff, and it was never meant to be easy for non-coders to use. So unfortunately,
Okay.
that is by design. I wish
Well,
someone
I mean,
else would make something which was much more user friendly and not charge an arm and a leg for it.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Good advice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, the number of times, yes, I've had Git headaches. Yes, yes, yes. So, all right, let's have a quick chat. I sent you this during the week. Sorry for everyone for the blinding white thing here. This is a story from the Financial Review, and I looked at this because obviously the games industry is in a bit of a slump. I know that's probably news to a lot of people, but the games industry is in a bit of a slump right at the moment, worldwide. And I saw this Melbourne entrepreneur builds $3 billion gaming empire out of a solitaire app. Now, I think the first alarm bells started ringing when I saw the solitaire app part of it, but still, $3 billion gaming empire. I mean, that's pretty good, eh?
That sounds, yeah, that's a lot of money. That's
A
a lot of games you can
lot of
make.
money, yes. And then I discovered, yeah, yeah. So as we went into it, unfortunately, basically it gets down to, I think, first up, what would you do? For I guess serious businesses, serious game developers. Yeah, this is maybe not what you would want to do. This is our man right here, Mr. Triple Dot, Melbourne entrepreneur, Al Shamides. I think that might be Greek. Make from free mobile games. Okay, well, the story starts to emerge. Free mobile games. So unfortunately, yeah, when I first saw this, I thought this is great news. I could send it to all my gaming students and say, hey, look, you can actually make money out of games. But then we went into it, and then I went into it more deeply, and Triple Dot's first game, Solitaire.com. I mean, look, at the end of the Solitaire, okay, maybe, but then they doubled down on a whole lot of the, I mean, basically this is just making money out of sort of some of the worst aspects of games. Unfortunately, yeah, but they've made a lot of money out of it. So we've got acquisition including portfolio of 10 studios that publish games like Cash Tornado, big one. Cash Tornado, you heard that one? Wordscapes and Wordle I have heard about.
Well,
Cash
not
Tornado?
not New York Times Wordle. This is Wordle with an exclamation mark.
Oh, right, okay, this is a different Wordle.
This is yeah.
So, and I think also they were involved, I'm not going to read the whole thing now, but they were involved in gambling, if I'm not, if I am not mistaken. So, well, maybe I got it wrong.
The previous studio he worked at was a lot to do with gambling and slot style mobile app games.
Right.
I think for me, I mean, there's a lot of little red flags.
Which make up one big red. Actually, here it is. The social casino company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one that really sort of indicated to me that there was no going back is up at the top, just above the headshot there, is the quote. Our hypothesis was that if we could build a game that's 1% better at everything for the player, we would show them a few ads every session and actually build a really big sustainable business.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds fine until you start thinking about it, and it's like, so you're just trying to take other game ideas and make them ever so slightly better.
Yeah.
Just enough that you are the better pick, the more desirable pick. You're not trying to make the
no
better
creativity.
game.
No creativity. No. This is about making money. This is about making
And
money. Yeah.
that also comes into play then when they talk about there was I think this has all been spurred on by a recent acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a quote there, that one where it talks about Cash Tornado, Wordscapes, and Wordle. The deal will also diversify Triple Dot sales, so no single game will generate more than 10% of total revenue. So it's really
business
it's
money.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is not games. This is just straight up tech and media advertising.
Well, is it
Um,
not games? I mean, it is games. I mean, whether you like it or not, I mean, for purists like us, and I am a purist when it comes to this sort of stuff, this, there's a lot of money in this type of gaming. A lot of people really enjoy it. So, I mean, they are games, whether we like it or not.
yeah, I guess
Mm,
the distinction that I'm trying to figure out there is, when we talk about games and game
mm,
design, the games we're playing, we're talking about games that we've purchased,
mm-hmm.
where these are games where you are sort of the sales factor, right? It's the players watching
You are the
as
product. You are the product.
exactly, and so it's
Exactly.
like, yeah, they're
Yeah. Yeah.
games, but it's not games. It's not the games industry, and
Yeah.
I think there's the other big red flag there is they talk about taking their experience working on from their previous company working on gambling games and
Yeah.
applying it to these new ones. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I think we talked about this weeks ago, where I was like,
We did
where is that line?
the dark patterns
Yeah,
in games, in game design.
like we
Yeah.
as game designers, we want to use a lot of the tricks and the way human brains generally respond from like a psychological standpoint
Mm-hmm.
to create emotion and create a compelling experience. And this is, how do we use that to maximize engagement? How do we make sure that they're using our app for as long as possible? And it's like, this is not new. This is not a surprise.
No.
It's just another reminder of like, man, it blows.
Yeah. I love this quote here. I started my games career here in Melbourne and went out into the world to find my fortune. I mean, like, I kind of find this a little bit offensive that he's saying he has a games career because that's not what I consider to be a games career. It's like, gambling and games are not like, there's gaming, which is gambling, and then there's games, which is art, or at least something a little bit better than, fleecing people out of their money, basically.
And I really wanted to make sure I had my head wrapped around this. So I was doing quite a bit of Googling and looking at posts and reading things. And I think one of the threads I found that really kind of spoke a lot to me is, like, it starts with that red flag of like, oh, you came from this gambling background and you're talking about these like sort of addictive, these dark patterns in game design. And then they talked about just a little bit here and there about their excitement to use AI. And there was, I saw on LinkedIn, not this person specifically, but the CEO talking about how now that their audience is so large, that's so much fuel they can use to train artificial intelligence.
Was
And
this in
they're
this
coming at
other
it.
thing
He
you
talks
sent me?
about it. Sorry?
Was this in this one?
No, I've got it's a LinkedIn. I can drop you the link.
That's okay. That's okay. Sorry, I thought I just switched to it if it was.
Yeah, it's on LinkedIn, so it was like I was really digging. But yeah, it was like they came at it from this idea that players will get tailor-made experiences because we can use AI to customize it to each player. And I'm like, well, if you can afford that, that means that you're not only are you selling all these people's information to advertisers, like so many places do, but it's almost certain in my mind that you are using that information to train AI and sell it on. And it's like, you can talk about the legal argument of, oh, well, if the player agreed to the terms and conditions, then that's totally fine, they're allowed to do it. There's also the illegal argument that's happening where it's like terms and conditions are too long for people to read, too full of jargon. It's not really fair.
It's not a
But
real
I think
choice.
morally,
Either. It's not a real choice.
exactly.
Terms and conditions. It's
You're
either you
not-
say yes or no. There's no negotiation in their terms and conditions. It's either, if you
And
want to
so-
use this, you got to agree to the terms and conditions.
There's a thread there that concerns me, sort of parallel to the gambling one, where it's like, what information are you collecting, and how are you using that with AI? It's just, I'm like, that's a lot of people, that's a lot of info into something that I really am concerned about. Yeah, a lot of concerning things. The one thing I saw on EO, I really should have looked up a pronunciation for him. But the person who's focused on in this Australian article, he does talk about a non-profit founded in Melbourne called Game Changer, um, which
Yeah.
sounds interesting. Supposedly helping teach underprivileged kids how to make games.
Okay.
I couldn't find any info on it, which was upsetting. I really wanted to see what that was about. But I did find he references working with the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, and I looked them up, and they seem to be a pretty chill non-profit organization. So,
Yeah.
what am I
Yeah.
trying to say? I guess there's a small silver lining here where I'm like, hopefully he's using all of this money and influence his game to make positive impacts. But if you ask me, if it came at the expense of, gambling, dark practices, addictive sort of game design, and the use of AI and the selling of information that way, I'm like, does that make up for it?
Mm. Well, he wouldn't. Well, this company wouldn't be the first company to try and was it the virtue washing? Is that what they called it? By sort of dodgy practices, going in and giving money to charities to sort of make themselves look cleaner. To like it's a bit like absolution. Going and getting absolved of all their practices. So. That it's a bit disappointing. Where do you think the line is for these style of games? Because of course, we've got Fortnite. Would you put Fortnite in the same category as these other styles of games? I know. Well, there is a mobile Fortnite, of course, but I mean, it comes from Epic. It comes from one of the sort of obviously biggest game engine developers. And they have been involved in what we might call the real AAA, game development for a long time. But it was probably the first game. I think Fortnite was the first game to use a lot of the techniques and strategies that were used in online games, except sorry, not online. I mean mobile games. In a PC-based game. So, I mean, have they crossed the line there?
Yeah, I guess personally, I find it tough with Fortnite because I feel like the the gameplay feels quite separated from the storefront, the battle pass. And so I feel like, I don't hear a lot of stories of the game being more addictive than any other game. I mean, it tailors quite heavily to children, and so there is concerns there. But like, you'll always find games that kids find addictive because I think that's the nature of games, and we should be more careful. We could do better, but it doesn't feel like they're leaning into that. But in the storefront side, that's where I feel maybe they have crossed that line. Especially, the sort of hyper capitalism, the introduction of all these different IPs and the limited time sales, like that's all. But
they are those dark
hard,
patterns.
like,
they are getting into those dark patterns. Free to play as well. Having your V-Bucks, your in-game money system. That you can only use. You have to use V-Bucks to buy things. So it's definitely using a lot of those dark patterns for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is interesting. So the actual game itself, like it is a decent game. But yeah, everything they put around it. I think there was I don't know who I don't know the name, but there was a particular person who was responsible for that, and they were the first ones I think to do all that. Battle pass and all that sort of stuff, and it got picked up by a lot of other online multiplayer games. So,
and it's the fact that you can play Fortnite. You can like min-max playing Fortnite to avoid spending as much money as possible, and I think you would get through without having to spend anything, right? You can play the game as much as you want without paying a cent.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lot of these mobile markets, you can't. It's like you said with the terms and conditions. There's no option there. If you're playing, there will be a banner ad. When you play, 20 minutes, you might get a pop-up and you have to hit the tiny X. Like, it crosses into that gameplay side. And so I feel like right now, that's an easy line for me to draw as like, well, if you're doing that, then you're probably, overstepping.
Hmm.
But in a better world, maybe, yeah, Fortnite would be crossing that line because they use those. It's just right now you can just separate it enough.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Yeah, you can just separate enough, but it certainly has. It has one foot on the dark side.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has one foot firmly planted on the dark side, which is, I guess, is a little disappointing.
yeah.
So, anything else you want to say around that one? No? Or
It's a
you still got
lot.
like an hour or so. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We could get into it, but yeah. A
I don't know. Hold
last
hope,
thought.
I
Last thought to
guess.
wrap up. Come on, last thought to wrap up. What? Yeah.
Last thought to wrap. Hold hope. Make cool games. Make art. Focus on making art. Art will prevail. We'll figure out money afterwards. Don't take that as financial advice. That's emotional advice. That's how I'm
Mhm.
hanging in there.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there we go. Wise words from Fraser. Alrighty. I just had 2 coffees before we started, so I have to have a quick a quick bathroom break, and I'll be back in half a second. So
Sounds
just hold your horses for a sec. Okay, I am back.
alrighty.
All right, so yes, so we're going to talk about some stuff. So first up, the journey so far, the things we've been talking about the last few weeks or so. So what have we talked about the last few weeks? Well, essentially, what we've been doing is looking at. So we're looking at the game, and we're looking at the I guess the main protagonists involved in developing and playing the game as well. So, we've got our designer who designs the game. We've got the development team who actually builds the game, and sometimes there's a bit of crossover and what have you. But let's sort of assume that those roles are separated completely. And then we have the player that plays the game. We've been looking so far at each of these roles in a way. So the important thing is really how each of those sees the game itself. So the designer, designs a player experience. So we're talking about the design of player experiences, and then translates that design into a form that can be used by the development team to play the game. So the designer actually sees the game as both a player experience as well as a collection of game actors, or things that make up the game. We talked about those last week and calling them game actors. So that's the designer. So the designer has to sort of straddle 2 kind of ways of seeing the game, both seeing it as from the player's perspective, as a player experience, and from the development team's experience, for the development team's perspective, talking about game actors and the actual structure of the game, or what the development team needs to build. So the development team actually is the group of people who build the game, who primarily will see the game as a collection of game actors that need to be created. So there's a bit of tension there, and at the moment, there's it's not necessarily the difference between those two isn't necessarily strongly understood. I think in the industry and even in the sort of academic research side of things. And then, of course, we have the player. Player has a player experience and sees the game as a collection of player experiences. So, and that's just basically how you, if you're playing a game, how you might describe it to, a friend, or if you're writing it up online, it's all about what you experience as a player of the game. You could argue that if, as a player, you start actually seeing the game as a collection of game actors, then perhaps the game development team has kind of dropped the ball and hasn't really done their job in that respect. So, yeah, agree with that. Any thoughts on that so far? It's kind of what we've been kind of looking at, the interplay between these three different protagonists when it comes to games.
Yeah, no, it reminds me a lot of sort of the adjacent study I've been doing into things like wayfinding and architecture.
Mm-hmm.
You can split those up just as easily as the architect versus the builders and all their various roles.
Absolutely.
And then the person who uses it at the end. And I think there's a really good sort of analogy there, which
Mm-hmm.
helps me at least sort of remain focused on what each aspect is.
So in that case, instead of a game, we'd be talking about some type of building. Could be a house, could be a public building. The architect is the designer. So here we're talking about obviously game designer. I mean, architects design buildings, game designers design games. Development team, is in architecture is going to be your engineers, your builders, your
All the tradies.
interior designers, all the trade, all the trades, etc. And you need to communicate to them what needs to be built. So they don't necessarily have the big picture. I mean, if you're a plumber, do you really give a crap about the big picture of your building, or do you give a crap about where the pipes need to go? That's pretty much what you need to do, isn't it? Why do you care about the big picture of the building?
Yeah, and it saves that the designer can't get too focused on the super minute details, right? Like I keep thinking about, I'm imagining it in the sense of like a doorway,
Mm-hmm.
where the player should pass through the door. It should be where they expect it to. It should open how they expect it to.
Mm-hmm.
The designer / architecture, their whole job is making sure that the door is placed in a way that is natural for the player, but also fits the fire codes and creates a good pathway for light and those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the framer, the carpenter that's putting it in, they're focused on does the door meet the specific requirements? Are these wood panels installed correctly? Are my hinges on the right side? And so it's all about like trying to develop this network in harmony so that everyone's jobs are easier and they each focus on their specific aspect.
And we're talking about, particularly if you're talking about large buildings, skyscrapers or something, you're talking about thousands of different components, different bits and pieces that sometimes need to be built from scratch. So you might need to build your door from scratch, all the different parts of it, and it all needs to fit together nicely and work when it comes to the user or whoever's using the building. It needs to actually, and it doesn't need to just, when it comes to architecture, it doesn't need to just be functional. It needs to have. There's an architect. Was it, I think, Christopher Alexander, who came up with this concept of design patterns, and the design patterns are, in his words, how to create spaces that have life or have that X factor. Because you may have experienced some different buildings that just have a bad feeling of it. They just don't work very well, even though functionally they work. Acme is probably a good. Remember, we went to Acme when you came here, Fraser.
Yeah.
That has been notorious since it was built in the 90s. Like, it just never worked. People hated it. People stayed away in droves. And they've had to continuously change it again and again and again. And now it kind of works. But initially, that piece of architecture people hated it. and it just did not work on a human level at all. Even though functionally it was fine.
I loved that that example you gave with the player experience, where if they're not seeing it as just player experiences and they're starting to see the actors, then maybe something's gone wrong. It reminds me of that classic sort of design with push and pull doors. You know, where if you put a handle on a door, the user's going to expect to pull it. And it feels the same way in games, right? Like if you do something, you pull the player out, and then all of a sudden they're critiquing the game. They're no longer focusing on the experience.
Yes. And we should, with that, because I think that's an example from a great design book, The Design of Everyday Things. So if anyone hasn't read that, definitely recommend it. Very influential, highly influential book.
I think I first heard about that through 99PI, which is fantastic design podcasting.
Oh, okay.
The podcast, I guess like NPR, really good. I mean, if you haven't heard of them, check them out. It's all about design thinking, and they cover so many different broad topics. A lot of urban design, but it's really interesting and really well done.
What was the name again?
99PI. 99% invisible.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. Okay. So, yeah, I just wanted to frame that. I think it's kind of important to sort of see what we're really doing. So we've spent, a number of weeks going through all this, and essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to support the designer in their job and the way they see the game. So, needing to see it both through player experience and a collection of game actors, which then, if the designer does their job properly, then they're supporting the development team in being able to see the game simply as a collection of game actors. If you're a game actor focusing on AI, if you're a programmer focusing on AI, you don't need to know about all of the game world. You don't need to know the big picture of the game. You need to focus on the AI and exactly sort of what's going on. So, you need the designer needs to present the development team with a view of the game that is suitable for them, so that they can actually create it. And then, of course, we've got the player, and as we were saying before, the player should see the game as a collection of player experiences. And ideally, you shouldn't be thinking about anything other than that experience. If you start thinking about that AI is terrible, then something's probably going a bit wrong. So that's what we've been doing over the last few weeks. Now today, I think this might be our last kind of theoretical week. We're actually going to talk about player experiences. So we all know player experiences, as we were just saying. So the player plays the game, and the player has a player experience. So what is a player experience? Oh, it's kind of everything that internally that happens with a player. It's what's going on. It's the way they feel. We've talked about the different aspects previously. Now, but we do have these things in the sort of model we put together, which I'm calling a player experience. So a player experience is, I guess, a little like an esoteric, what happens within the player's mind. The game actors are the components of the game. So there's two major parts in this. Player experiences occur in the game world, not surprisingly. They couldn't really occur anywhere else, but it's when the player goes out into the game, in the game world, which is pretty much everything in the game, they have some kind of experience. So let's just talk about sort of player experiences. They're also hierarchical in the same way that game actors can be hierarchical as well. So you can have like a big picture, if you like, player experience, and we'll look at some examples in a moment. And then within that, you may have smaller player experiences as well. So going down to that level. Here's an example from Rust, an analysis I did of Rust, where I went through and did a wipe day, and then also within that, player experience, you can also say there's other player experiences which are valid in their own right, such as doing things like resource gathering, crafting, base building, and combat. Now you notice we're not talking about any of the components there. We're not talking about how you build these things. This is simply what the player's experience is when they're doing things like all of this. And that's pretty common in a lot of different games. A lot of different games you'll have things like resource gathering. A lot of different games will have crafting, base building and combat. So these are pretty common. Now, this next one is pretty important. So, describing player experiences. So far, we've talked about the different relationships, the personal relationships between the player and the components, so the game actors. But the way we describe a player experience is using something called a player story. So this is kind of where we start getting, and in fact, in a way, we're ending at the beginning, possibly, because player stories, I think, could be a logical place to actually begin your design journey. So, but that's fine. I think we had to do this in reverse. But player stories. So, what are player stories exactly? So, player stories describe a player experience. So, obviously, we'll go back here. This is exactly what we're talking about. So, a player story, it describes this player experience. So, they tell the story of the subjective experience of a player going through some sort of player experience. They are not part of the story, script, or narrative of the game. So keep that in mind. Don't confuse player stories with the backstory, with the script, with the narrative, or the game story. They are not. That's that thing. Player stories are very much about what happens to the player in the game itself. The story and the script narrative of the game can be part of the player story at the same time. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It's an important distinction there. So I've got an example. Or do you have any questions? I'll pause there for any questions if you've got any questions, Fraser. Or comments.
It's sounding to me like a technique we used in wayfinding, which was I think it was called the walkthrough, which was essentially almost like a storyboard where you describe either with words or visually sort of the path a person will take and what they see and hear and feel along the way.
Yep. Yep.
Is that sort of on the money?
Not using storyboards, I wouldn't say. Although I guess you possibly could use storyboards. I hadn't really thought about that so much. I guess I was coming more, because my background's more sort of IT. So I was thinking more, in fact, about user stories that sort of come from the agile world of software development.
Right.
So, but the way you describe this can be either way. But it's sort of a high level description of what's going on.
Yep.
With the player. So I have an example here. So this is a example of a player story describing a typical wipe day in the game Rust. So what happens in Rust is that it is a multiplayer, massively multiplayer game. I guess you can have 100 or more players on one server, and what tends to happen is that the servers will have a life cycle, which might be a week, might be 2 weeks, could even be a month, but they tend to be sort of around the 1 to 2 week life cycle. So a wipe day is the day basically as soon after they wipe the server and create a new game world. So everything starts kind of from scratch. Make sense?
Yep.
And it's usually the most exciting part of the game. I don't know whether you've played sort of multiplayer games like this, Fraser, but it's usually one of, like, everyone wants to get in on wipe day. It's where lots of opportunities there. Everyone's kind of starting from the same point, and it's a good time to actually get on there. If you're late, then of course you don't necessarily have the best choices to build a base. Other people have sort of progressed before you have, so there's limitations there. Now this is kind of long. I normally wouldn't read this out, but I think it's kind of important to actually get an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about player stories. Now this has come from, we did look at this last week, I think. So was it this one? This is the overview of Rust. Yeah, we looked at this last week, but then we also have the player story. So this sort of comes from, this is the document that I had together. So this is the text from here, and it sort of goes into sort of a lot more detail. So you can see the amount of like text and diagrams we've got here. So there's a lot of sort of stuff that goes into this. I have kind of made it a bit more, I've tried to keep it down, simplified a little bit, so as not to make it too complicated or boring. Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's go.
so, all right, so I'm going to read through this. Okay, so this is the player story of a white day in Rust. So I wake up naked and alone on a beach, armed only with a rock and a torch. At this point, I'm completely vulnerable and pretty much anything can kill me. As it is wipe day, there are dozens of other fresh spawns logging into the server and racing to survive and find the best base location on the island. At this point, I have little in the way of gear and resources to lose, but competition for the best base locations will be fierce. Driven by a sense of fear, excitement, and the desire to win, I run at full speed to find a good base location and collect enough resources to build a small base. On my journey, I encounter a few other players. The unwritten rule in Rust is trust no one. If I'm lucky, I see them first and attack before they know I'm there. If I am unlucky, they see me first and I get headshot with a spear, lose the meager amount of loot I have been able to accumulate, and respawn on the beach to repeat the process again. Anxiety runs high. After a few false starts, stunning victories, and humiliating defeats, I finally have enough resources to build a base in the spot I've chosen. I've crafted a building plan, a hammer, and tool cupboard which will prevent another player from building near my base once it has been placed. I have managed to get enough wood and stone to build a small 1x1, a single room with a metal door and a key lock. It's not much, but it will keep me alive and give me a place to store resources so I don't lose everything if I'm killed and looted. I choose to build under cover of darkness. With any luck, I will get it done before being seen by another player. I pull out the building plan and start placing a foundation and walls, when all of a sudden, out of the darkness, smack, another player, alerted by the sound of my building, has headshot me with a bow. My panicked fingers mash the keyboard while my adrenaline-fueled right arm sends the mouse across the desk, spinning my character around a couple of times on the spot, giving my nemesis ample opportunity for a second shot. Smack, a body shot with this time, but it's enough to bring me down. Sweat drips down into my eye, blurring my vision as the message, "You have been injured. You will die if you don't get help soon," comes up on the screen, and my character lies prone in the game. Or my avatar lies prone in the game. All that time, all that effort, all those resources, my precious base gone, unless I can somehow save the situation. So I do what any brave, resourceful player would do in the same situation. I grovel. GG buddy, good shot, I say using the in-game chat. I see the other player character looming over my body. "Come on, man, can you pick me up? I've been killed hundreds of times today," I say in my most pathetic voice. He makes no reply except to start looting my body and taking all my precious stuff. If he has played the game for any time at all, he knows how duplicitous Rust players can be. If he picks me up and leaves a weapon on my body, I'm just as likely to kill him with it as soon as I'm back on my feet. Having taken everything he wanted, he teabags me a couple of times and ends my tortured existence with a hatchet to the head. I wake up naked and alone on a beach. So that is a player story describing a high-level player experience.
I think the first thing that jumps to mind is actually back when I was doing script writing.
Yep.
Because, and it's funny, you talked about how this could essentially be the start point, which is how I feel like that sort of script writing went. Like, you come in with a vague idea, and writing the script helps you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because I can almost see, going through and highlighting the different aspects, what parts are, actors in the game, what parts is player experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps. I love how much it helps realign focus to being on the player experience and the emotions and all of that comes from playing the game,
Mm-hmm.
and not just, the functional relationship. So.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And it can't, I think this sort of thing. I mean, I guess if I make an observation, I think one of the challenges video games, digital games have, is that they came really from programming. If you think of the makers of from ID Software, was it James Abrash and oh goodness me, how can I forget the other guy? Remember the other guy, the programmer, James Abrash and
I can think of John Romero.
was it John Romero? Is there another guy I'm trying to think of? Anyway,
I'm Googling.
they're all coders. And Carmack, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, yeah. So he's still heavily involved in. He was working for Meta for a while. And he's still quite involved in sort of 3D type stuff. Programmers don't tend, with some exceptions, don't tend to write this sort of stuff. This is not what programmers generally enjoy doing. This is the sort of thing that more big picture people tend to do. Programmers, by their nature, tend to be more focused and detail focused. Whereas to write this sort of stuff, you need to have a bigger picture. And I think this is one of the reasons why game design hasn't progressed in some ways, because you need to have the mind, I think, of a designer, of a sort of a big picture sort of design person to do this sort of stuff. Whereas I think a lot of game design in maybe the last 40 years or so has, because of historically, has been kind of dominated by the sort of more programming culture. And look, my undergrad is in computer science as well, so that's where I come from. But I also like stories and things as well. So I think that's one of the challenges we have in that. So sort of, designers and maybe more humanities people would find this fine. Programmers, I think, would often have some issues with starting at this particular point. So anyway, anything else you wanted to say, Fraser?
Yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from in the sense that there are a lot of questions in here, and that is purely the nature of the difference between a narrative story like this and a game where there is interactivity and choice to be made. And so I could definitely understand, like, yeah, if you were to write this and then to try and hand it straight to a programmer, they'd be like, what am I doing with this?
Yeah.
Which is
absolutely.
why I think, yeah, we the value of it comes from how it frames the player experience, their emotions, and all those things we've talked about, sort of trying to capture, and sort of getting that heightened version of it. Trying to like wrap it all up into one neat little story, which I think is done well here.
And it's interesting, I think psychologically, stories, I think it has been said that our mind is kind of, like stories are some of the building blocks of our mind. Stories themselves are fundamental to human experience, which is quite interesting. So framing it as a story, really sort of brings it back to what's going on within our mind as well. So
yeah, I mean, that was all over the wayfinding book that I was reading, is about how travel and navigation is encoded in similar ways as stories, and I think that sort of lines up with that. The memory people that try to remember as much stuff as they can, where they encode that into a physical space, but also tie a story to it. So yeah, I think narratives are really deeply seated in the human brain for sure.
So you're pretty comfortable with narrative and writing stories then, Fraser?
I don't have a lot of like direct experience in writing, but yeah, I've been sitting in that sort of narrative space for a long time for sure.
So if someone asked you, so you're designing this game at the moment, if someone asked you to start writing player stories for your game, would you be comfortable doing that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because it's not. I think it's important to keep in mind. This is not the same as the as writing a screenplay or anything, which I wouldn't be comfortable writing a screenplay because I don't know anything about it. But I'd be comfortable writing this because
It
I know
actually
a lot about playing
reminds me.
games.
It reminds me of. I haven't done it. I haven't written it out as extensively, but this is a very similar space to where I've started for the D&D stuff that I've done.
Okay.
Um, is coming at it from sort of like the player story,
Mm-hmm.
and then building world elements, lore elements, enemy encounters to sort of fit and to help guide it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think in that sense, where I was saying there's a lot of questions left in here, that's the same for sort of tabletop role playing, right? It's like I like to go in with a story in mind, build all the things to support it, but then
Mm-hmm.
have the open space on the edges so that if the players take different turns, it still works.
Yeah. So I guess the difference between a tabletop role playing game like D&D is that and a digital game is that you can be more flexible as a human being with a mind. You can kind of be more flexible if things are not defined. Whereas in a digital game, everything has to be coded. Like you're not there, you know, you or I are not there. If there's a game there and someone does something different, the game has to still stand. So we have to be more detailed, I think.
Yeah, at least for me, with the D&D prep, it's about creating things that can support me
Mm-hmm.
in the playing session.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas obviously in games, it's about creating things that support the player.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. Cool. Okay, should we carry on?
Yeah.
All right. So, as I said before, there is a hierarchy which we just looked at. So we have the wipe day player experience that we just read through. And within that, we have other player experiences. So definitely resource gathering. We've talked about resource gathering. We've talked about crafting. We talked about base building. We talked about combat. So within that one experience, we have other experiences as well. And you could potentially go down into more detail here. Although I think perhaps at this point, so if we can look at some examples here, this is kind of where the game components involved in the player experience are described using game actors. So we've got the player experience. And as an example, so let's have a look here. So these are some simpler ones. I'll show some little more complicated ones in a second. But we're talking about resource gathering. So this is the relationship diagram here. So basically we're going to have one avatar there. And within the game world, we're going to have a lot of resources. So if you're giving this to and there's a relationship obviously between them. This is the relationship diagram. This is going to tell, like if you're giving this to your development team, there's one avatar. There's going to be lots and lots of these. So it tells them something about that. And then we've also got the interaction diagram, which is the other part of that. We've got here, so a solid line is something interacting with something and then also communicates with. So, and you would include some text here to tell them what's going on. This is again the resource gathering experience, which says have our resource pickup. So the avatar interacts with the resource pickup here. And then the resource pickup in return will communicate with the avatar saying, hey, you just picked up like 100 wood or 100 stone or whatever it is. Now a coder or a technical team at this point should be able to say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know what's going on here. There's enough information here for me to create that pretty straightforwardly. Shouldn't be too difficult. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? We have talked about these the last couple of weeks, haven't we?
Yes.
These sort of things. So some other examples which we did look at. And I haven't. Let's put it up there. So we looked at these, I think, last week as well. The photo actor. There's a couple others I've got here, but this is a fairly good example where we've got the photo puzzle experience. You've got the frame puzzle down here, and you can see this is the actor relationship diagram. The photo frame puzzle. There may be many of those within the game world. It's a single player game, so there's only one avatar. But each photo frame puzzle also has one photo frame, and multiple photo pieces there. And also each photo frame puzzle is linked to one door, and will unlock that door once you complete the puzzle. So you should be able to see again, how this all works together. And then we've got descriptive text here, which you always do need to support this. And then in the interaction diagram, you've got the same thing: photo puzzle experience. We've got the photo frame puzzle. And what happens here is the interaction this time. So we've got interacting with and communicating with. The avatar interacts with the photo piece. So as an example, when we were going around looking at Silent Hills PT, we're looking for these photo pieces. We zoomed in on them, and then the photo piece basically says, "Yeah, I've been interacted with," communicates to the photo frame puzzle, which then also updates the photo frame saying, "Hey, this photo piece has been found." So then it appears in the photo frame. Once it's been completed, the photo frame puzzle, all of the pieces have been found, then it communicates to the door and unlocks the door. So that's kind of what we said last time. That's kind of the lowest level of the sort of the whole system of describing how the games work.
Yeah, I think I like this one the most because it feels more intuitive to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely I have to stop myself from thinking about how you can add more information to it. Like, how do we indicate that the door only opens once all the photo pieces are there? But I'm like, it doesn't matter. That's not the point of this diagram.
Yeah.
This is to show that base level,
Yeah.
which I think, once that's understood, that's when you start building on and go, okay, well, here's the specific details. And it's also because, like, those specific details don't matter as much as the base sort of interaction, right? Like, whether it's 6 photo pieces or 3 it matters, but it's not as important as the photo pieces interact with the frame puzzle and the photo frame.
And I mean, you do bring up a good point, and I think we did talk about this previously as well, is that, how much information do you need to provide? So if you're doing a specific thing, then yeah, you might say we're going to have maybe, X to Y photo pieces. So maybe, 2 to 10 or something like that. But the question is sort of, where do you need to put that? How much information do you provide? Etc. So if you're just doing a generic, photo puzzle experience here, then in a way, I guess putting an upper limit there may be a good idea. Having said that, and you can put it somewhere, but yeah, it is a question of how much information you should have, and where you pass it off to the IT, or so the technical team, and you just say, okay, that's enough information. Obviously, they can come back to you and ask questions if they need to, but there should be a point where you're like, okay, that's enough. That's the information that you need, and there may need to be more potentially. There's certainly opportunity for developing things more and more. The number of photo pieces, as you point out, could be a fairly important piece of information.
Yeah, and it also doesn't get into things like where they're placed, but I guess the more information you add, the more confusing it gets.
But why would you tell programmers where it needs to be put?
Yeah, well, no, not not in that scenario.
So it's not like programmers don't. That's not what they're worried about.
No, yeah,
just in the game world somewhere.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. So a programmer needs to understand that it needs to be there in the game world. The designers or the level designers, once you get into that, but then you would come into here and we're in game world. You could certainly add that information. Obviously, this is a very small game world, but you could add that information in there if need be, or you can kind of also leave it up to them to, depending what you're doing, Because if they're designing the specific parts of the game world, then it may actually be better to leave it up to the level designers to decide where it's going to go.
Yeah.
Again, there are definitely grey areas where you would probably need to negotiate with your development team how that's going to work.
Part of working in a team, I think, is having those grey areas.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So that's pretty much the whole thing. We've kind of covered the whole gamut there. So we do have now. Let's go back to sort of where we were talking about it initially. So we do now have, a way to. We have tools for the designer to design the player experiences, describe the player experiences, and then translate those into different diagrams, different documents, using game actors, and being able to give those to the development team, who then will be able to develop the game. And with any luck, we have a player who will then be able to play the game and have a great player experience. So that's pretty much
Do you want a fun little anecdote about player experiences that I had?
Okay, sure.
Over this last week, we talked at the start of this section about how the player experience can stray if they're starting to identify game actors instead of just the experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I had that, but in like the opposite sort of form.
Yeah.
Where I started playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 recently.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the sequel to Yakuza Kiwami. And so I'd played completed two Yakuza games, set in what is basically the same map, and functions in the same way. Specifically for this is you're limited to the main streets and only certain alleyways. Other alleyways are blocked off with props, and there's no physics. You can't push through them. They're just not accessible. And I started playing Kiwami 2, and I was completely taken out of the player experience because all of a sudden there's physics props. I can push stuff out the way. I can go into all these little alleys. They, in Zero and Kiwami, when you went up to like a shop or a restaurant, you'd go to the door, you'd hit A, and then you'd be loaded into a new map that was the interior of the shop. And in Kiwami 2, you walk up to the door, and animation, like in-game, doesn't change. Kiryu opens the door, and then you can keep walking forwards. And I lost my mind. It was all about the game actors, but it was the improvements made the world feel more immersive, and so did feedback into the player experience in a positive way. But I thought that was a fun little, you don't sort of think about the game actors adding to the player experience when they're noticed like that. But yeah,
so is that because it sort of it broke your expectations? It sounds to me like it broke your expectations.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I jumped over a railing on like the first floor of a building and dropped a whole story and landed. I was like, oh my god, I've only seen him do that in cutscenes before. It's crazy.
Right. So look, I mean, obviously, if you're playing a whole series of games, and you're going from, like, I'm not sure exactly, when was the earliest one made that you played?
I think Zero so far is the earliest made. I gotta check the dates because Kiwami were remakes of 1 and 2, I believe. So Yakuza 0 was March 2015.
2015. That's 10 years ago now. That's not that long ago. It's only 10 years.
Well, that's the prequel.
Right.
And then Yakuza 1 was made way before that.
Oh, okay.
So 0 was 2015, Kiwami was 2016. And Kiwami 2 was 2018, 2017.
And which one did they start having doors that you can actually go through and actually enter the same spot?
Kiwami 2.
2017.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's interesting. So it was a design choice before that because they would have had the ability to take you into just another room.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't
technically,
know,
for sure, 100%.
I don't know the development history well enough. All I know is that
This is a PC game.
it was originally placed. Well, yes,
Hang on, it was originally PlayStation. Is that what you're saying? Because that would explain the limitations potentially on technology. Because consoles have a lot more limitations than PCs.
I
No?
I don't. It's, I'm not sure. It's
Okay.
because because the original Yakuza and Yakuza 2 have been recreated in the newer engine, which is the Kiwami games.
Yeah.
But then 3, 4, 5, and 3, 4, and 5 were just remastered, so I assume that's just a visual.
Uh-huh.
But then Yakuza 0, which is the prequel, hasn't been because it was newer. It's really complex in my head. We need to get a Yakuza
Yeah, yeah. No, but
expert
all
in
I was
this.
really saying is that a lot of the changes like that within a series of games. Obviously, technology is a big issue. So sometimes some of those things are that way, the way they are because of the limitations of RAM or cycles, processing cycles or graphics capability, etc., etc. So it's kind of interesting. I find it interesting you were saying that it was an improvement, but it broke immersion. So I mean that's kind of
Yeah,
not what you're after when you're creating a new game.
yeah. I guess uh, it typically in series, right, that you'd have more than a year gap between installments, and so
Hmm.
you've played other games in the meantime, which have pushed the technology, and so like the technology isn't too much of a leap. But
You also might be seeing marketing material as well, like if you're playing them when they come out. So the expectation is there for you if you've seen
I guess, yeah, I wasn't
gameplay videos
expecting
and
there
stuff.
to have been this leap because from what I
Mm.
understood, Kiwami and Kiwami 2 were in the same engine.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, that maybe played quite a large part to it as well. But there
Mm.
definitely
Mm.
is that, the experience that I had in Zero and Kiwami 1 of um, those being so similar and being stuck to very specific parts. And so, yeah, definitely a combo of things I think added up to that moment the other night when I first started playing it.
Mm. Mm. Oh, it's interesting to hear. Yeah, cool. So yeah, we've sort of come a long way over the last few weeks, starting where we did back here at talking about player experiences, and then the Avatar game characters and world. Then last week talked about game actors as well, and then this week player experiences. So there's quite a lot there. That's what 80. Oh, we did talk about emotion and stuff as well, didn't we? We went into that. So, but yeah, that's about 85, or 86 slides. So it's a fair way to go. And there you go. So next week, are we back on to looking at Arvo? Where are you at with Arvo at the moment?
Yeah, so we're got a bit over 2 weeks left of our prototype month, so
That's
things are
right.
still
Yeah.
pushing forwards. Gemma's
Yeah.
been working on dialogue and quest systems. I've been working on map stuff. So next week I'll hopefully have some of the physics enemies up
Yep.
and going. I'll know how to describe the work Gemma's done.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have I should have quite a bit more to show.
Cool. No worries. Okay. So another couple of weeks to go of just doing the prototype. So we'll get
Yeah,
a
just
chance to have a
getting
bit of a look at the prototype.
proof of concept.
Okay. And what are the plans when you get your prototype?
Once
Or when?
prototype's
Yeah.
done, we will assess what has worked, what hasn't. We'll come back to more of the proper design stuff. That's probably when I'll start
Mm-hmm.
creating more of these documents and using
Mm-hmm.
some of these tools that we've been talking about these past few
Mm.
weeks.
Mm-hmm.
If it is playable, hopefully we'll have it up on itch somewhere. And if it's appropriate, maybe we'll do some playtesting and get some feedback on it. And it's sort of a mix of trying to do as much as we can to help develop the game, and then also creating evidence and sort of documents and proof that we can use to try and get some more funding to sort of legitimize the concept and the game and its worth.
Yeah.
So,
do you have any ideas where you're gonna where you might apply next time for funding?
We'll go back to Screen Australia. They have another round in August, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
Just because we think, well, I mean, it's a really good fund if we can get it.
Where is Gemma? What state's she in?
New South Wales, and
do they not have a fund as well?
They did have one. I haven't heard about them running it again. Screen Australia, they've been doing 2 times a year, whereas New South Wales, they only had one at the start of the year that ran at the same time.
Right. Right.
But I think they also had restrictions on how much had to be produced from the state.
Yeah, that would generally be the case. Yeah.
It would have been a bit tricky. And I did have a look for more funding opportunities, and a lot of the government stuff, it's all like tax incentives and kickbacks and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of those, they're capped. I think SA was around 250,000 spent on dev was the sort of minimum before you could start receiving money back.
You're not planning to spend 250 grand on development?
Oh, I would if I could.
That can be in kind. Don't forget, like that doesn't necessarily have to be development dollars that you're spending. I mean, if you work out, say, how much it costs for a programmer, say, for argument's sake, let's say it's $1,000 a day, so that's $5,000 a week. $20,000 a year. $20,000 a month or so. So you can work it out that way. You can work it out in kind.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't always have to be money that you're spending. It can be work that you put in. If you put a dollar value on that, that actually goes toward that.
I mean, the dream timeline happening at the moment is getting this second round of funding from Screen Australia, and then using some of that to talk to an accountant and sort of get the balances worked out and see, all those opportunities where we can, get as much assistance as possible in getting it going. But it really is that fight of like, I just want to make the game, having to do business stuff is just
sucks.
It's the means to the end, and so it's a fight. But I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess you just got to do it at a certain point. You got to make it work yourself if you can't get the opportunity.
Yeah, you just got to find ways to get it to work, basically. So it's not it's not always that easy, for sure. And knowing the different things you can do, so like you doing work in kind and stuff like that, understanding how that works. So,
but yeah, the application. So the next round opens next month, 10th of July, closes on the 28th of August. So we'll be doing that again, and then we'll be hearing back by sort of October, November, how we went there. So that's the new timeline for Arvo.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so yes, and it's still just the two of you.
Yep, so far.
Okay.
We had a chat about your advice. And I think we're just a little stubborn, is the main thing. Especially while it's we're just doing it essentially as a passion project. We sort of want to see how much we can achieve, and then if we get a grant and we have some money, then it's a whole different ball game of what can we optimize, what can we pull someone else in to do that we're not super efficient at. So that's sort of where we're at. That'll probably change in a couple months, though. Our standing on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I look. The problem is like if you don't have a team that can actually, if the funding organisation doesn't believe has the skills to build the game, then you're not going to get funding. That's a basically a showstopper for them.
Yeah.
So, coding, art, design, audio, you need to sort of make sure that you can tick all those boxes. Otherwise, they're just going to say, "Well, why are we going to invest in a team that obviously can't, from our and they're judging from their perspective,
Yeah, of course.
a team that we don't believe can actually deliver. So then they're not going to give money to something like that. So you need to keep it in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what this prototype will help as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is you know, we'll the bits that work we'll have to show to say, hey, we made this prototype and we were able to do all this. And then any parts we can't do is a really easy opportunity to be like, hey, we couldn't get this done in the prototype. So if we got enough money, we would allocate, we would find somebody to fill those gaps. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm confident. I'm looking forward to it.
Are you going for the same one, the $15,000 one?
We're interested in the 100,000, the max 100,000.
Was it 100,000 out of 500,000 spend?
That's what I had feared, but I think it's more so because I'm looking now, and I think they've updated the $30,000 grant.
Mm-hmm.
It says projects with budgets up to 500,000. So I think that is more a stipulation, so that they're not you're not like a AAA company applying for these funding opportunities. So
yeah.
But yeah, I think based on the scale, that larger funding fits better, and that also then, like you're saying, in terms of like team size, makes more sense for us to be able to say, we need X amount of the budget to support ourselves in this development process. That leaves so much left over. We can use a percentage of that to pay an artist, a 3D modeler, or a musician to implement. And I think it's more feasible at that scale than the 30,000.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Was it 30,000? I thought you said it was 15.
I keep getting confused. It is 30,000, but
30, okay.
Because of the two of us, I think I had kept splitting it down to 15.
Right. Okay. Cool. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, keep us abreast of what's going down.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, cool. Is there anything else we want to talk about? It's kind of coming up to 4:30, which is our normal finishing time. Anything exciting?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've run through. It started off a little heated, and then I've come through with all the information, and then I've sort of hit my fun little my weekly Yakuza update. So I think I've hit all the checkboxes.
Cool. Okay. So maybe we might wrap it up just a touch early today, and come back next week.
Awesome.
All right. Cool. All right, everyone. Well, catch you guys all next week. Have some fun, and take it easy.
See ya.
See ya.